We all know the saying, pride comes before a fall. But how does that relate to our business? Stay tuned to find out. If you're new to the channel, I sell books on Amazon KDP, and I've also recently started an Etsy shop as well. And over the last year or so of selling, there's one thing that I've learnt, and that is the importance of overcoming your pride. So there are a few reasons for this. The first thing, and probably the one that I struggled with most, is more from a personal perspective. Let's say you've created a book that you're really proud of. You put it out there, you maybe spend some money on ads to get some sales, and then the reviews start coming in. And this is no different than getting some feedback on social media, some feedback from your friends and family, or even comments on YouTube videos, for example. But when a negative review comes in, it can really hurt. And yes, you get trolls who are just going to give you negative feedback, whatever you do. But often within the negative feedback, there are threads of constructive criticism that you can take to improve your content. Now, if you're too prideful, you think your book's amazing and it can't be improved, you're not going to listen to those small bits of constructive criticism that will make your content and your products better and over the long term sell more. Also, just to mention, if you're so focused on how good your content is and you get a negative piece of feedback, it can really hurt mentally. So yes, be proud of your work, but try not to be so attached to it that a small piece of negative feedback is going to break your spirits. Now, moving on to a business perspective, we're going to look at this in two areas. The first is creating your content. In this video, we're going to say that's a book. So you might have a fantastic idea for a book. You create it, you write it, but in order to get it on Amazon and to self-publish it, you need to spend some money to get a cover, to maybe get it edited, to get it formatted, etc. Now, if you're too prideful about your work, you might trick yourself into believing that it's going to sell so many copies, that you're the 0.1% of authors that's going to be super successful with their first book, for example. Now, often it doesn't matter how good your writing is, how good your book is, it's a really competitive marketplace. So let's say you really believe in the book that you've written. My suggestion would be to give yourself a budget that you don't mind basically spending to get no return on, just in case it doesn't sell. But if you truly believe that your book is amazing and you're really proud of it, you might decide to overspend on it. So for example, instead of creating the cover yourself or getting a pre-made cover or someone on Fiverr to do it, you might pay a professional. Because your book's so good, it deserves that professionally made cover. And that can be true for things like editing as well. Instead of self-editing, getting some friends to help, using editing software that's out there for a low cost, you might decide to hire a professional editor. And now, yes, in an ideal world, every single book would be professionally edited, but it can cost thousands of dollars to do so. And again, if you're prideful and you think you're going to sell thousands of copies, what's a couple of $1,000s for getting it professionally edited? But if you're a little bit more cautious, you're probably not going to spend that much money up front on your book, especially if it's your first book. So that's what I'm talking about from the creation side of things, for trying not to be too prideful about your work. Obviously, you're going to love whatever you create, but at the end of the day, it's up to the consumers to decide how good it actually is. Now, the next part of this is when your content or your book is actually live. And I'll hold my hands up, I'm very guilty of this one. And that is believing that your book deserves to sell. So let's imagine this. You've got a book that you're super proud of, you love the cover, you're really happy with it, and you launch it. Some family and friends buy it, but then crickets. No one seems to be buying your book. You do some research, you'll look into why, and then you'll realise, oh, actually, I need to use advertising to get my book in front of the right people. So maybe you watch some YouTube videos, maybe you watch my videos, who knows? But then you start some advertising. Now, you know your book is amazing, right? So it deserves a big budget in order to get some sales. So let's say you know how to do advertising and you're not just testing it and trialing it, you set up some ads to sell your book. What then is most likely to happen is that on a single book, you're going to have a negative return on investment. And what a lot of authors and content creators here are guilty of is keeping those ads going or even spending more on them. Now, at the end of the day, that's just going to lose you money. Yes, there is an argument of running at a loss in order to grow a user base, but for most of us kind of smaller authors, that's not going to be an effective way to grow your readership. There's much more effective ways out there, like growing a mailing list, for example, and doing reader swaps with other authors in your genre. But if you love your book so much that you think people are going to love it, you might keep those ads going for longer than they should be. As I mentioned before, that was totally me with my fiction writing. I released a standalone sci-fi book called Watchers. It sold quite well to begin with, mostly from family and friends, and then crickets. So I ran some ads for it, did some research and realised that selling a standalone fiction book was very, very difficult. So eventually I turned those ads off after spending far too much money. I thought I had the solution, and that was to write a series. That way, if I'm spending too much money on the first book, it doesn't really matter because people will go on to buy the second book and the third book in the series. Now that sounds great in principle, right? I love my books, I think they're really good, I think they're really fun. They're definitely a little bit weird and dark, but I thought if you like the genre, you like the book, you're probably going to go through and buy the second and third books. Does that happen? Yeah, sure. But it's probably not going to be as many people as you think it should be. So I wrote that dystopian trilogy over the space of around 2 to 3 years. It's a lot of work to write a book. I actually spent money on editing. It wasn't professional editing, but I still had a friend who was an editor that I paid a little bit for. And at the end of the day, I was really happy with them. So I spent a lot of money on ads to that first book. And I tried so many different marketing things on that first book. I used Amazon ads. I used Google ads. I used Meta ads. I tried things like Free Booksy. I ran discount deals. And for all of the hundreds and hundreds of dollars that I spent on launching those books, as soon as I turned the ads off, they sold zero. And that's generally the issue with these kind of things. I think when you're creating a book, it's important to love your work, but not be so attached to it that you keep those ads going for longer than they deserve to be. Now, I hope that this video wasn't a complete downer. My advice would be to be proud in creating, be savvy in producing, and be cautious with advertising. Sometimes the sales are completely out of your hand and it's a matter of luck of whether it's well received or badly received. So my advice to you would be to focus on your craft, keep making your books better and better, and once you've finished a book that you're really proud of, move on to the next one. Now, this video is a little bit different than my normal types of content. Let me know if you enjoyed it or not, and leave a comment below on anything else you'd like me to cover on this channel. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.